A €50,000 goalkeeper making a fingertip save to shut down a €250 million Spanish offensive line. He made 7 saves that night, securing a 0-0 draw against the European champions. By the next morning, his Instagram following jumped from 50,000 to over 2 million. At 40 years old, he became one of the oldest goalkeepers to ever keep a clean sheet on their World Cup debut, putting him in the same statistical bracket as legends like Peter Shilton. By age 40, an elite goalkeeper is usually on a farewell tour, collecting accolades after a long career at the top of the sport. But this was his debut, which raises an obvious question. Where was this guy hiding for the last 20 years? The answer is that nobody suddenly discovered a hidden talent. This debut was the final payout of a 2-decade-long refusal to leave the sport. The timeline starts here, in Mindelo. It's a port city on the island of São Vicente in Cape Verde, far removed from the heavily funded football academies of Europe. He was born Josimar José Évora Dias in 1986. His father named him after the Brazilian right-back who had just surprised the globe at that year's World Cup. Because his parents were always working, his father served in the military, he was raised primarily by his grandparents. As a kid, he spent so much time with his grandmother that everyone started calling him Vozinha, which translates in Cape Verdean Creole to Little Granny. When he started playing in the local leagues, coaches quickly dismissed him. To them, he was too short to play in goal, completely lacking the imposing physical frame they wanted to see. Without access to elite training or early recognition, the logical move was to quit. Instead, drawing on the quiet resilience he learned from his grandparents, he stayed on the island and kept grinding through the semi-pro regional leagues. This chart compares a typical professional trajectory to Vozinha's. By 24, a standard pro peaks in a top league. Vozinha's line is completely flat. He played amateur football in obscurity until age 25, when he finally secured a professional contract to play in Angola. Arriving at his new club, there was already a goalkeeper named Josimar on the roster. Rather than be registered as Josimar II, he printed the name his community had given him on his shirt. Vozinha became his official identity. His late entry into the professional ranks coincided with a call-up to the national team. In his 2012 debut, he helped Cape Verde defeat Cameroon, securing the country's first-ever qualification for the Africa Cup of Nations. Spending his early 20s fighting for a spot in regional leagues built a serious psychological armor. When he was finally thrown into high-pressure international matches, he was completely unfazed, quickly becoming the calm anchor of a rising Cape Verdean squad. Over the next decade, his club career took him through Angola, Moldova, Cyprus, and Slovakia. By the time he reached his late 30s, the physical and mental wear of jumping between leagues was adding up. He was nearing 40, and he seriously considered stepping away from international play. He started to accept that his ultimate goal, playing on the World Cup stage, was simply not going to happen in his lifetime. But the younger players in the Cape Verde locker room saw him differently. They actively intervened, coaxing him out of semi-retirement and convincing him to stay on for one final World Cup qualification cycle. To these teammates, he was the emotional center and the living history of the squad. After years of organizing the defense and mentoring new call-ups, his presence on the pitch had become indispensable. The squad navigated the African qualifying rounds and secured their first World Cup berth. And right there in the starting lineup was their 40-year-old goalkeeper. Which brings us back to that match against Spain. A small island nation with limited resources standing across the pitch from a highly valued, globally dominant Spanish side. Following his performance, commentators and fans began describing Vozinha using a specific metaphor. The Cape Verde archipelago is made of 10 islands. They called him an 11th island, a space of shared pride built entirely on his persistence. That 85-cap journey took him from an undersized kid rejected by local coaches to an impenetrable barrier on the world's biggest stage. His career proves that the biggest stages in sports are not exclusively reserved for early blooming prodigies. Sometimes, history simply belongs to the people who refuse to leave the pitch.